thee by the hand of him whom thou wilt send. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, Is not Aaron on the Levite thy brother? I know that he can speak well, and also, behold, he cometh forth to meet thee, and when he seeth thee, he will be glad in his heart. And thou shalt speak unto him, and put words in his mouth, and I will be with thy mouth, and with his mouth, and will teach you what ye shall do. And he shall be thy spokesman unto the people, and he shall be to thee instead of a mouth, and thou shalt be to him instead of God. Okay, you may be seated. Sorry, I know that was a lot, but when I was thinking about what I was going to say, I wanted to really get the point across, and I wanted to show you through the scripture that the Lord spoke to Moses, and he tried very hard to get Moses to see that he was going to lead him to do this, that he was going to be with him. And Moses still didn't listen. So before I go any further, I want to make it known that I don't think that Moses was a terrible person. We know that the Lord used him in a great way, and he did all that even though Moses couldn't get it through his thick head that he could in fact do what the Lord was asking him to do. So even though I'm using Moses as my example, I know that his faults weren't like his ending. It wasn't what usually he's remembered for. In these verses we read that the Lord heard the cries of the children of Israel, and he chose to use Moses to bring them out of the land of Egypt. This would not be an easy feat, and the Lord knew it. The odds that Pharaoh would allow the Israelites to leave Egypt were not good. Even though this would not be easy, the Lord told Moses that he would be with him from the beginning. We see in verse 12, and he said, Certainly I will be with thee, and this shall be a token unto thee, that I have sent thee. When thou hast brought forth the people out of Egypt, ye shall serve God upon this mountain. It was apparent from the very beginning that Moses was not going to do this alone. This was not just some idea that Moses conjured up in his head. The Lord spoke to Moses, telling him what he needed to do, and that he would be with him the entire time. God was speaking with Moses, and he told him that he knows that leaving Egypt wouldn't be easy, but he would smite Egypt, and after that, they would be allowed to go. Even after all of this, Moses wasn't willing to listen. Now, I don't know about you, but if the Lord himself spoke to me and told me to do something, I hope that I would plan on doing it. I hope I would listen to him, especially after the Lord told me that he would be with me. I say I would do that, and I really, truly hope that I would, but how often do I read something in the scripture and not listen to it? How often do I read something and come up with an excuse as to why that doesn't apply to me? And on the same hand, how easy is it for us to do something that our friend or maybe a family member tells us to do, but we can't listen to the Lord? I can remember one time, I was probably about 12, and my sister, I don't recommend this, but my sister and I snuck out of the house in the middle of the night. We lived in Granby, which is way up in the northern part of Connecticut, and for those of you who don't know, it's basically a farm town with a population of around 11,000 people or so. There's one major intersection in town, and it's known as the center, and that's like where all the excitement happens. This intersection has pretty much 3 routes that cross through it. There's 10 and 202, Route 20, and Route 189. So 10 and 202 goes north and south. So that goes from like Simsbury or Avon, and then it goes up into Massachusetts. Route 20 goes from Bradley International Airport, and then that goes into West Granby and like Barkhamsted area. And then 189 goes from Bloomfield into North Granby and then also into Massachusetts, but not into Southwick. And there are 2 grocery stores in Granby, just 2 of them. One is called Geisler's Supermarket, and that's an IGA store, and the other is Stop and Shop, but it doesn't even have a gas station, so it's not one of those Stop and Shops. The closest Walmart is at least 20 minutes away, and that's in East Windsor, Connecticut, and then the other 2 closest ones are 25 minutes away each. To give you a little bit more perspective, there's a Cumberland Farms, and that's known as Cumbies to all the local people. That's pretty much like the local hangout spot, and even though you're not supposed to hang out there, there's a sign. There used to be a McDonald's, but it's not there, and it did not have a drive-thru, which I've only seen a few McDonald's without drive-thrus. That was one of them. And then there is a park, one of them, called Salmon Brook Park. The high school and the middle school are located on the same property, and my graduating class had, I think, like 180 people, and that was a very large graduating class. Generally speaking, there's not a whole lot of crime. and it's usually done by punk teenagers if there is a crime. And, it's just one of those small towns. You kind of know everyone, you know everyone's business. There's a paper called the Yankee Flyer, and in that you can actually read, who was arrested over the weekend. So you know, oh, okay, my friend's dad was speeding, and he got a speeding ticket. That's all in the paper. So it's a pretty small town. When you go to the grocery store, you probably see at least 3 people that you went to high school with, and one of them probably works at the grocery store. And so anyways, my sister and I, we decided to sneak out. I was maybe 12 or so, and we had been watching a movie, and then she mentioned that we should go into town, which really wouldn't be anything too exciting, but we had nothing else to do. So I don't even know if anything was open. I can't remember if the gas stations were open past 11 or not. I think they closed at 11 p.m. But so it probably took her maybe all of 3 minutes to convince me that it was a good idea. And we probably could have just gone out the front door, but there's no fun in that. So we climbed out my bedroom window, and because it was the only one on the first floor. And then, so we started walking down the street. And one thing to note is that 99% of the streets do not have street lamps. So only the ones that were the roots would have street lamps, and usually that was only near the center of town. Because again, remember that was the hot spot, the center of town. And we didn't have smartphones or anything, those weren't out. And I don't know why, but in my house we literally never had flashlights with working batteries. So we didn't have a flashlight. And so in order to walk to the center, it was maybe 2 miles. And most of that was going to be in the dark. So we ran in order to not feel like someone was going to jump out of the woods and attack us. I don't know if anyone else ever thought that. I don't know if it was just us, but the likelihood of that happening was probably slim to none. But I found out later on that when my mom, she grew up in the same town, when she would walk home, she felt the same thing. So I don't know if it's just a family thing or what. But so we were walking to town, and we didn't even get to the center of town, and a police officer rolled up next to us. And, he asked us what we were doing, because in Waterbury or maybe even Naugatuck, people walk around at all hours. It's not that big of a deal. But everyone was probably home by 11 p.m. in Granby. So it was kind of suspicious that these 2, young girls were outside. So the police officer asked us what we were doing, and, we told him we were just out for a walk. He asked how old my sister was, so she would have been maybe 17. And he figured she was old enough to keep track of me and told us we didn't need to be out late and we needed to go home. So that was honestly probably the most exciting thing that happened to him that night and probably to us all summer. But it really didn't take her that long to convince me to do something that I knew I shouldn't do. Even though we both knew that my parents wouldn't have wanted us to sneak out, we did it anyways. We wouldn't benefit from it. It wasn't going to improve our quality of life, yet we still did it. And I wonder how often we do that to the Lord. He'll tell us to do something, and yet we won't do it. Sorry, not how often we do that to him. How often we, don't do that to him? Sorry. I don't know why I have that in my notes. The Lord will tell us to do something, and instead of us just saying, yeah, okay, you know what, we'll do that. That seems like a good idea. We give every excuse as to why we can't do it. We can't wear skirts all the time because it's not as easy to play sports in them, right? Or we don't want to pay our tithes because we like to keep our money, and we don't go to church every time there's service because we would much rather be doing something else. We come up with so many excuses as to why we can't follow the principles found in Scripture. We give all of these reasons why it shouldn't or doesn't apply to us, when in reality the principles are there to help us, not hurt us. It takes an awful lot for us to see that we need to submit to God and do what He is asking us to do. But on the contrary, it seems like people are looking for a reason to sin. God has to really work on our hearts to convince us that living for Him is right. But as soon as someone tells us, oh, hey, let's go do this wrong thing, it seems like, yes, okay, that's what I want to be doing. And we have no problem feeding our fleshly desires when what we really need to do is follow Psalm 34:8, and that says, "Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good." Instead of feeding your flesh, take some time to follow the only one who can truly satisfy you. I promise you can spend your whole entire life searching for something, that will satisfy you, something that will fill that void. You can seek that satisfaction through relationships or drugs, alcohol, even a high-paying job. And, you can name it, someone has tried it and it's let them down. You can spend all of your time trying things that will destroy you when all you have to do is just taste and see that the Lord is good. Spend some time with Him. Allow Him to mold you, to show you the areas you need to change. Spend time with Him just because He's God and deserves it. If you do those things, I promise you, you won't regret it. So, as we saw in our verses, Moses argued with the Lord, and the Lord showed Moses that He would equip him to do what needed to be done. But at the end of the day, the Lord ended up using Aaron as the spokesman because Moses couldn't overcome his fears and inadequacies in order to submit to God and do what was asked of him. And what a sad day that had to have been. I know the Lord knew that was going to happen because He knows all things, but part of me still wonders if it disappointed Him. That even after all of that, after He gave all those signs to Moses and, He was talking with him because He wanted to free the children of Israel, and Moses still wouldn't do it. I know that would probably disappoint me, and I just can't help but wonder what the Lord thought of that. And this morning, actually, as a pastor was speaking in Waterbury, I was like, he's kind of using a lot of the same ideas that I was going to be speaking about today. And so Blake was like, oh, well, then all you have to do is just recap his sermon and, we can be on our way. But I do have just a few more things I want to talk about. I want to give you just 2 reasons why we don't or won't do what the Lord is asking of us. And keep in mind that that's in no way an exhaustive list. It just has been 2 things that have come into my mind recently. The first reason is because we believe we are inadequate. So we won't do what the Lord is calling us to do because we believe we're inadequate. We believe that we don't have what we need in order to get the job done. I don't know about you, but I like to have everything I need in order to do my work. That's just how I am. I can kind of do things on the fly, but I'm most comfortable when I have all of my items, I know what I'm going to do, I know how I'm going to do it, and I can just get it done. That's my personality. So sometimes we believe that we don't have what we need in order to get the job done. The feeling of being inadequate is something that I think we have all struggled with at some point. Sometimes it means you feel like you aren't good enough. Sometimes it means that you feel like maybe you could do it, but that someone else is better than you, and they can do it instead. Or it could mean that maybe you have been told you're no good, so you start to believe it. When the Lord spoke to Moses, he had excuse after excuse as to why he couldn't do what the Lord was asking him to do. And this was a big deal. This wasn't, God nudging Moses to go pray with someone at the altar, like, maybe he does with us. But Moses was supposed to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt and into the promised land. Moses felt inadequate. He said it. He was arguing with God. He said, well, I'm of a slow tongue. Like, I don't speak well. I'm not an eloquent speaker. And he had all these reasons why he couldn't speak to Pharaoh and lead the children of Israel out of Egypt. Now, I understand not being full of yourself and just flaunting your knowledge and abilities to everyone. Like, some people do that. It's kind of annoying. But at the same time, we need to stop selling ourselves short. In fact, I would go so far as to say that when we tell God we can't do something because we're not good enough, we're insulting Him. Imagine that. We're insulting the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, the one who literally created everything. He loved us so much and saw us worthy enough that He went to the cross for us. He shed His blood for us. He was beaten and tortured for us. I didn't deserve for Him to do that for me, and I definitely shouldn't walk around with all these excuses as to why I'm not good enough when He thought we were good enough to go to the cross for us. So I shouldn't think that I'm not good enough to do what He is asking of me when He gave His life for me. Our inadequacies are not a good excuse as to why we can't do something. Just like the Lord was going to equip Moses and give him everything he needed to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt, the Lord will provide for us and make it so we can do what He is calling us to do. I can guarantee that almost every, if not every, pastor has felt inadequate at some times, but they haven't allowed that to stop them from doing what God has called them to do. Just like God told Moses that He would be with him, the Lord will be with us. And just as a side note, I wanted to say that this is a good time to point out the fact that, like, as wives, it's our job. We should be strengthening our husbands. You know, we should be lifting them up and encouraging them. We shouldn't be belittling them. You know, we shouldn't be pointing out their faults. No doubt, he probably knows he's not perfect because he's human, and you know, we shouldn't be making him feel even more inadequate. You know, that's not something we should do as wives. And guys, you know, that kind of goes the same for you. Your wife is supposed to be your helpmeet. Don't put her down or pick on her. The world does a pretty good job at making women feel like they're inadequate, that, you know, they need to dress a different way and wear all these different things so that, you know, they can look a certain way so that they can be accepted. So, guys, don't make your wives feel like they have to go and look like the world so that you'll stop picking on them. And parents, don't pick on your children. You know, don't tell them that they're dumb and not good enough. Don't call them an idiot, and don't compare them to other children and tell them that you wish they were more like so-and-so's kid. You know, your child is being shaped all of the time, and if you're not encouraging them and helping them, they'll no doubt feel like they're not good enough. And if you can't feel good enough at home, you know, if a husband can't feel good enough at home, or a wife or a child, then they'll have a really hard time feeling like they can do what God is asking of them. You know, at your house is where you're supposed to be able to feel the most comfortable. So I think we should all be trying to encourage each other and not worsen the inadequacies that we already feel. The second reason, so the first one is because sometimes we feel like we're inadequate, we can't do it. The second reason is because someone else will do it if we don't. And this might be true. Someone else may step up and do what you won't do, but in the long run, you'll most likely regret it. I've never heard someone say, I wish I hadn't submitted to God and done what he asked of me. But I have heard people say that they wish they had submitted sooner. You know, we can have all of these excuses as to why we didn't have time to submit, or, you know, that just wasn't a good time in our lives. You know, it just wouldn't have worked out if we had done what the Lord was asking us to do. But in the long run, you'll end up regretting that. You know, you'll end up thinking, well, what would have happened if I had just done that? And I don't think that's anything we want on our hearts. God ended up saying that he would use Aaron as the spokesman because Moses obviously wasn't going to do it. And I wonder how many times Moses regretted that. How many times did he think back on his conversations with the Lord, and how often did he regret not fully submitting and doing what the Lord was asking him to do? How many times did Moses think about the fact that his God had showed him that he would be there with him, and yet he didn't listen to him? Now, the Lord doesn't need us. We've all learned that. You know, I think we get told that almost every week. But he does choose to use us. He allows us to be involved. So what a shame it is when we have made it up in our mind that we won't do something because it's not our responsibility, when the Lord is giving us the opportunity to be used. He could do it himself, but he's allowing us to do that. But in our head we say, you know what, someone else will do it. And that can be something as simple as, like, I don't know, like vacuuming at the church. It doesn't have to be, you know, God calling you to be a missionary or to go plant this church, but we all have a part to do. We just had our youth convention over the weekend, and on Friday night, I think it was, when the speaker, Brother Batchelor, was being introduced, they said that he had been speaking since he was, I think, 16. And so they were telling all the young people that they should listen because, you know, this is someone that got involved when they were really young, so there's no excuse as to, oh, I'm only 16, so I can't do something. But when he got up, he said, you know, that, yeah, he had been preaching since he was 16, but since he could remember, he had been helping out at the church, you know, doing his part to clean. And this part was kind of gross. He said that there was this one guy, I guess, and whenever he went to his section in the sanctuary, there were like toenails that he would have to pick up off the floor. And I mean, I don't know who does that in church. Like, especially a guy, when you think about it, like, I don't think there are any guys in here that are wearing like open-toed shoes, so I don't know how he's getting those I don't know. So he said that he was cleaning, and that was kind of what he was doing for a certain amount of time. You know, he was just helping, he was cleaning, doing whatever needed to be done. And he didn't always like it. He didn't always want to do it. You know, he said he didn't want to go clean up those toenails, but he did it anyways. And sometimes that can be what God is asking us to do. Like, just go help the pastor. Ask him, hey, is there anything that I can do for you to help you? Just make it a little bit easier on you. Or maybe some of the Sunday school teachers, like, do you need me to bring in a snack? Or, just different things we can do just to help those around us, just to be involved, to do that work. I don't know what it is that each and every one of you are called to do, but I do know that we are all called to do something. And whatever that is, the Lord could probably use someone else, just like he ended up using Aaron, but you would be missing out if you didn't submit and do what the Lord was asking you to do. There are so many different reasons as to why people don't submit to God when he's telling them to do something, and I think that this reason is probably one of the most foolish ones, just because someone else can do it. And I'll try to prove that to you. So imagine this. It's a hot, humid day. It's sunny outside. It's in the middle of August. And around here, it can get pretty hot in August. The kind of day where you go outside and you just immediately feel like, okay, I need to go take a shower because it's all sticky and just nasty. So you get home after working a long day. You're exhausted. And on the drive home, you were thinking about that moment when you would finally go inside into your nice air-conditioned house and you would get to rest for a little bit. So you were in such a rush, though, that as you walked out of the house in the morning, you forgot to check to make sure that the AC was on the right setting. Now, you figured, okay, well, I didn't do that, so maybe my child will do it or my spouse, someone will do it. And so you weren't really too worried about it. Oh, and on top of that, there was garbage that needed to be taken out. And you thought that someone else would do that as well. It wasn't my job, someone else was going to do it. But they thought the same thing. So they didn't check the AC because they knew you always did it, and they didn't take the trash out because maybe they did it the last time, so it wasn't their turn yet. And so instead of getting home and walking into a nice, cool house, you step into a sauna that smells like the nastiest garbage that has been baking in the hot summer sun all day. That's pretty much the exact opposite of what you were expecting, but it could have been avoidable if you had just stepped up instead of waiting for someone else to do it. Now, maybe, you didn't have time to do the AC. Okay, that's fine. Well, like, taking out the garbage, that was pretty simple. Just do it. And I do want to say, though, just that Blake is really good. He does help me out a lot. This isn't like a personal experience that we've had. And, so I've never come home and like, okay, wow, the house stinks like garbage. So it's not about him, don't worry. But I think it is something that maybe we can all think about in our heads and say, okay, yeah, that could happen. I could come home to a nasty smelling house and it probably was avoidable. So there are dozens of reasons as to why we don't do what the Lord is asking us to do, but putting it off just because someone else can do it, that might be your responsibility. So just step up and do it. And I have just one more thing I want to mention before I close. Moses died before entering the Promised Land. In Deuteronomy 34, verses 4 through 5, it says, "And the Lord said unto him, This is the land which I swear unto Abraham, unto Isaac, and unto Jacob, saying, I will give it unto thy seed. I have caused thee to see it with thine eyes, but thou shalt not go over thither. So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab, according to the word of the Lord. And he buried him in a valley in the land of Moab, over against Beth Peor, but no man knoweth of his sepulchre unto this day." So Moses saw the promised land. It says that in the verses, but wasn't able to enter it. And I wonder how that felt. I wonder what it was like after all of those years to see the promised land and then to die before you're able to enter it. I can't help but wonder if part of the reason that Moses didn't enter the promised land was because he refused to just go and speak to Pharaoh, and as a result, Aaron did it. I wonder what kind of a difference it would have made if Moses had just done it. There are some things that we can only get through submission. When we submit ourselves to the Word and make Him the center of our lives, that's when good marriages are formed. You can see another couple and think about how great their marriage is. You can desire that type of a marriage. The one where communication is a constant, where the husband and the wife lift each other up, where they support each other, where they respect and love each other and don't, take cheap shots during arguments. You can want that type of a marriage, but unless you apply the principles, submit yourself and apply the principles, found in God's word, you won't have that type of marriage. You can see that couple just like Moses saw the promised land, but you won't have that kind of a marriage just like Moses never set foot in the promised land. And you can look at how some people are blessed financially, and sometimes that's like the biggest thing that's noticeable is, okay, we know that person has money. You know, they roll up in that $100,000 car, and they're wearing that nice suit. They have a huge house, and so we can easily see that some people have a lot of money, but we can want to live like that. But unless you're giving like the Bible teaches you to, you will always have less than what you could have. You can see the potential that's there and never have it, just as Moses saw the promised land but never entered it. And we don't give so that God can bless us and make us rich, but it's just a good principle to follow. But the Bible does teach us that if we give, the Lord is going to take care of us. So we can have the blessings of God financially, but there are some things we have to do first in order to get that. And I'm just about done, so I don't know if someone wants to come up and play. But just one last thing. Additionally, you can look at someone who is saved, someone who has repented, been baptized, has received the Holy Ghost, and is living in right relationship with God. But unless you take that step for yourself, you won't make it to heaven. You may be surrounding yourself with people that are saved, and that's a good thing. But you have to follow what the Bible says. You need to be saved for yourself. Truly, the examples are endless. There are so many blessings to living for God and submitting to Him, to answering His call. I could go on and on and on. And, we have to make it up in our minds that we're going to do this. I remember at Indiana Bible College, Brother Mooney used to always say, you have to know that you know that you know. So you have to know who the Lord is. You have to know that you know who the Lord is. So on and so on. And part of knowing the Lord is knowing what He likes and what He dislikes. It's knowing when He's asking you to do something, what He's asking you to do. It's following that. And I don't know what it is that the Lord is calling you to do. I don't know if you're submitting partially or fully or not at all. I don't know. I'm not you. Only you can know that for yourself. And I don't know if you're feeling inadequate or if you're just waiting until someone else steps up and does what you're being called to do. I really don't know what it is. But one thing I do know is that no matter what it is that you're currently going through, what it is that you need to be doing, you need to be a willing vessel. And you needed to be submitted to God at all times. Is it worth missing out on heaven because you couldn't get it together and trust Him? Is it worth it to miss out because you listened to your excuses and your fears over the one who saved you? So in closing, I have just one question to ask, and that's, will you reach the promised land? For each of us, I think the main thing in our head is, okay, promised land, when we think about it, is probably going to heaven. But I think there are little things in our life that we can reach, on a day-to-day basis, and maybe your promised land for today is just having that closer relationship with God. Will you reach that today? Or maybe it's forgiving someone that wronged you. Will you forgive them today? I don't know what it is that you're going through, but I do know that the altars are open today. So if you would come, we have ministers, people that will come and pray with you, pray for you, and you can make the decision to reach the promised land today.
me.